Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special session from Prep Doctors about the NDECC exam. We're just going to wait a couple of moments for people to continue to join. I'm, of course, delighted to have with me our co-founder and Chief Learning Officer, Dr. Marwan.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Dr. Marwan. How are you? So we'll just give it a few more moments as people join.
Hello guys, how you doing?
Is that you, Luca? Dr. Luca?
Yeah. How you doing?
Great. So just to let everybody know, we're also joined today by Dr. Luca Salvador, who is the president, I believe, of ITD AOC.
Correct.
Nationally trained association, internationally trained dental association of Canada. So welcome, Dr. Luca.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So we'll go ahead and get started with the program. And today is a session that is dedicated specifically to NDECC. Of course, we all know the results have just come out. So there's a lot of tension, let's say excitement, rumor, drama in the whole industry around the results of the exam and all of that. But let's start, Dr. Marwan, and maybe you can explain to our viewers why we named this specific session the reality of the NDECC exam.
First of all, thank you for having me, and thank you to everybody who attended today. I think today is a very important session, and thank you, Dr. Luca, for joining, because the ultimate goal that we want to achieve is success. We want people to succeed, and success is part of reality, and reality hurts. It hurts. You have to understand reality to succeed. And the opposite of reality is dreaming, illusion, rumors, information not based on scientific facts. And that can actually affect people on an emotional level. It can actually affect their motivation, and it can affect their ability to achieve success. So the whole purpose of today's session is not to sugarcoat things. We're not trying to make people feel better by telling them what they want to hear, but we want them to feel better in the long run by telling them the reality, what's happening in the industry, what they should be focusing on, and what's ahead of them. So that's why we chose this name.
Mm-hmm. So if we can move to, what's the biggest topic of today, which is the results.
Yeah.
We just got the results a few days ago. And so there are people who are delighted, of course, who have passed, people who are, on the opposite side of that who haven't. And then, of course, there are people in the middle who might have passed one of the components of the exam, but failed the other. What is your response as head of Prep Doctors about the results that we have just received?
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about it from two perspectives. And this is a reality, by the way. I don't think many people want to hear that. Mm-hmm. I believe the results were better than I expected overall, based on the changes that took place. I wasn't expecting this high of a passing rate compared to the changes that took place by the NDEB and the way the people were preparing for these exams. So overall, I am happy in that sense. What's actually concerning and is that, yes, people faced the reality now, I would say, which before the exam, they had a different expectation. So people built a different expectation. And when that expectation was not achieved, for them, it became hard to accept. And this is where people go wrong, because it's a transition. they build their narrative based on emotions, not based on history, not based on how the exams have been conducted in the past before COVID, for example. And then when things happen, they are surprised about facts that were well known well beforehand. I just want to give an example, by the way, just out of dentistry to help understand the situation. I have friends in the real estate industry. When Bank of Canada started to announce they're going to increase the interest rate, there's two types of agents. For those who looked into the future, it was clear where the Bank of Canada was going. They were going to screw up the market. The interest rate is, they said our target is to hit the 4 point above 4. So they announced all of that. People who accepted that, they prepared for it. But there were still some people waiting for every hike to happen, and they're reacting to every hike. And this is what's happening here. When NDEB announced the changes they announced are drastic on one side, plus there was a new component that was introduced. The situational judgment was a new component that was introduced, a very vague component to begin with. We had to build the course from predictions, and then they were revealing small facts bits by bit as we're progressing towards the exam. And by the way, the references were revealed after the exam took place, not even before the exam. And on the skills side, they announced that they are eliminating failure. No, you're not allowed to fail any more projects. That was announced. Well, that was the first thing that was announced, by the way, the very first piece of information. And then they started to announce the materials, changes in the materials, the time frame. Like a lot of facts came known to light only after, like close to the exam. And that was the challenge. And that's why observing what's happening was concerning to us. We were concerned. We were talking to people, they're concerned. And there was another stress factor on people. They were not getting seats for the exams.
Yeah.
So the hype that happened is people now are so desperate to get a seat for the exam. So their primary focus is, I want to get a seat. Their primary focus is not, I am ready or not ready. That's one. Their primary focus is they don't even know the reality of what is to be ready. How can we be ready? Plus, unfortunately, and I'm going to say it bluntly, a lot of people said, oh, if we capture a seat in the beginning, this is the time NDEB will pass a lot. So we want to actually jump on it. So we can capture that momentum. So people were fighting based on this information. They're hopeful that they can underperform and they will get a free pass.
Which is just a rumor.
It was,
it's not based on solid.
It's not based on evidence. And this is what I always tell people when we teach courses. I say, stop analyzing NDEB behavior, focus on your own preparation. Focus, be ready for the new reality, which is much more difficult. And what happened is when the results were released, people all of a sudden said, oh, I failed just by one project. But that's the new reality. Is yeah, you will fail the exam by one project. And it's not a new fact. This fact was known well before.
But I guess it does hurt knowing that during ACS, you were allowed to.
No, people are under a lot of stress. I'm not underestimating the stress that people were put through. Because this exam, by the way, when I was looking at it, I was looking at, okay, if we look at statistics before COVID and statistics during COVID, right? People who did the ACS exam during COVID, the passing rate was, I would say, almost double the passing rate that happened before COVID. Now, there is some explanations that some people used it as, oh, the NDEB made it lenient. But there is also another factor that these people have been training for 2 years. That's another parameter that wasn't taken into consideration. But if you go before COVID, you have a passing rate that is hovering between the 30s and the 40s. That's the passing rate of ACS. And that actually was the passing rate when you were allowed to fail a project. That was the passing rate when the time to do the exam was much more. So when they said now you have less time to do the exam and you're not allowed to pass a project, that's a drastic change, very scary change.
Yeah.
And of course, objecting to that change, NDEB, they are the ones who set the standards. So they said, this is what we want. What are you going to do? I'm not saying that apply pressure on NDEB, try to actually get the old criteria, but what if NDEB, they don't bend, they don't change this? That means if you want to succeed, you have to understand there is a new reality now. To pass this exam, you need way more effort than what was before, because the strategy of people before this exam was, what is my weakest project? I'm going to ignore it and I'm going to focus on the other, and I can still pass with a single failure. I'll pass the exam. Now you're not allowed to have a weak project. And then we look at people before this new process. They knew they had to practice for 6 months, some of them for 9 months. You know, they practice more. Now people believe, okay, in 1, 2, 3 months, I can practice for both and go to the exam. And that's where we're telling people, this is not realistic. When you make the exam way more difficult, the energy and the effort should be matching the difficulty. It's not like you reduce the effort and you increase the difficulty and you're going to achieve the same result. It doesn't work. And that's what happened. So when the results came out, people realized, oh, now it's a reality. Yes, failing one project, I will fail the exam. However, during the exam, people complained about time. They said, we had no time to check our work. And some of them came out, they said, I felt this project was weak. So they had an idea, but they were hopeful that they're going to be forgiven for that. And then when the reality came out and they were not forgiven, they did not like that. And if you want my opinion, I blame both sides for what happened. Like, I'm not going to say that the exam, by the way, is easy and you should be able to pass it. It's a way more difficult exam. And yes, there should be something, and that's where Dr. Luca will come into play. Later on, we'll talk about it, to apply pressure, organized pressure, so that we can make things better. But I also blame the disorganization and the lack of reality in candidates as well in preparation for the exam. And this is to speak to people who are still have not done the exam in the future, and also to people who have done the exam, because people were going to the exam with lack of structure. They're going to the exam with emotions. They did not have a true reality. Now I think everybody is starting to realize what's happening. So hopefully things will improve. But again, other rumors start to emerge. Like now people are saying, oh, situational is so easy, focus on the skills. And then you're going to see the next results, it will tip in the other direction. You know, and that's why you just have to be objective, prepare for both the best you can, because NDEB can accommodate for errors that they did on their part. So for example, if there was an inconsistency in actors, they will be lenient due to the fact that there was a defect on the conduction of the exam.
Right.
So they can accommodate things like that. But if they conducted a well-coherent exam, they're not going to come and be lenient for free with you. So yes, that's a small advantage, but it's not a significant advantage. And as the time is going to progress, the NDEB are also on a learning curve. They're going to be learning how to train the actors better. They're going to be learning how to conduct the exam better. They're going to actually fine-tune the exam so that there's no errors that's going to take place, or less errors. And then it's going to become more difficult actually to have these, because for example, in one of the exams, people said there was an actor missing in a station entirely. They went into a station, there was no actor.
Wow.
Okay. And they told people, we will pass you in this station.
Right.
So that's a free station pass. That's not going to happen again. There was one exam where the question was written in a wrong way and they fixed it halfway through the exam. Those errors, they happen in the first cycles, but they're not going to happen again. So that's where people can actually get a little bit of advantage, but it doesn't continue in progress like that.
Okay. I do want to bring Dr. Luca into the discussion. And Dr. Luca, if you're there, maybe first just give us a quick overview of what ITD AOC is. Not everyone might know exactly what this organization is and what's the purpose.
Hello. So my name is Luca Salvador. I'm the president of the Internationally Trained Dentists Association of Canada. And our main job, our role is to advocate for the improvement of the equivalency process for internationally trained dentists. That's our main focus right now. And I think there are two truths to hold together. One, everything that Dr. Marwan is saying. The equivalency process has become a lot more difficult because of the NDECC. Unlike him, I was a little bit more optimistic about the passing rates, so I was quite disappointed with the passing rates being as low as they were, in my opinion. But what this means is you need to work a lot harder, and what this means is now there are effectively 4 equivalency process exams. They essentially added another exam for us, in my opinion. So it's going to require a lot more work on your part to get through the process as it currently exists. But the other truth is we don't need to accept this. We don't. What they've done to us is genuinely unfair. And I don't think it's specifically has to do with the exam itself, because it's reasonable to ask us as candidates to assess our manual skills. And it's also reasonable to ask us to assess those other core competencies in the ACFD, our communication professionalism, stuff like that. That's reasonable. The question is, how was it going to be evaluated? And in my opinion, it was evaluated harshly and unfairly, and those passing rates don't reflect our competency. So what are we going to do about it? We need to put pressure on the NDEB to change. We've already sent an email with requests, suggestions to the NDEB to change some of the criteria that would raise the passing rate. For most people, you need to contact media representatives in your area. You need to contact political representatives in your area. Join the organization if you're able to, because the more members that we have, the more influential we could be. You don't have to accept this mistreatment on the part of the NDEB, because they are genuinely mistreating us. Because the standard to which we're being held to is 100% of Canadian graduates should be able to pass all of these equivalency exams without any preparation. And I think everyone listening to this could agree that that is ridiculous, and there's no way that's true. So the exams are way more difficult than they need to be. Most of the issues have to do with standard setting and how those exams are evaluated. We've submitted reasonable requests to address those issues. Now is the time to put pressure on them to implement those requests and suggestions. It's worked in the past when the NDECC was initially announced. It was required to pass both components in order to move on. Initially, if you failed one, you had to repeat the whole thing. We applied pressure, we got them to change that. If we do the same now, push for more changes, we may be able to get those changes implemented. So this is on all of us to come together to fight for these changes. And yeah, I hope you're all on board.
Can I comment on?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So I don't disagree with anything Dr. Luca said, by the way. What I want to highlight is, how do you apply pressure? Okay, and here I'm going to talk about organized work. You know, that's the most important, organized work and dealing with reality. Because changes, they don't happen overnight, they take time, and you're supposed to fight for that. One thing that I prefer over the other is to be proactive than being reactive. Meaning, for example, when they said if you fail one of the days, you're going to fail both, and there was objection from the beginning against that, they changed it. The fact that when things happen after results are released, I'm not saying that change may not happen, hopefully it will, but it just makes things harder. So that's why the push should be as early as possible, but the push also needs to have a strong support, and the support comes from the organization. So we have Dr. Luca, who's doing an amazing job being in the front and dealing with these issues, but he needs people to join and people to support him in the organization, which until now is not the level that international trained dentists expect it to be. They come, they talk. The volume of people who actually complain about things is much larger than those who officially get into organized work. So that is very important. Okay. So when people actually talk about the results that come out, and the reason I say this, because we have been in the process for a very long time. Okay. And when the way NDEB or the way things work over here is when you look at the statistics, and what I like that I think one of the requests was to release the statistics of this cycle, because one of the downsides is, and that's legit pressure to be applied, because now we have the October-September cycle, and then there's the November-December cycle. It's going to come later on. If they combine both results, it's going to be very difficult to actually, like, if the second cycle, the passing rate was higher, then it actually averages out. And then the mistreatment that could have happened to a single group does not get recognized, because when you release a whole year result, one shot, and there were 4 cycles, maybe one cycle got it very bad, and then 3 other cycles it was okay, and it evens out, and you don't know where things went. So we're trying to actually track things per cycle. We send surveys to people. We're trying to push people to respond. We only got 90 people to respond, okay, to the survey. I shared the statistics with Dr. Luca, and I can share them as well. And the reason I want to share the statistics, because based on the 90, the statistics from an NDEB perspective, based on individual exams, like if you look at ACS before COVID and the percentages now,
Right.
it looks comparable. The combined passing, and that's where it needs to be focused, the combined passing, it dropped.
Right.
Okay. So for example, if you look at the 90 people that replied to the survey, 68 of them passed situational alone.
Okay.
Not alone, like passed a situational. That's 75%, 76%.
Okay.
And then you have 43 passed the skills. So you're looking at 48%. Now, if you come to challenge these percentages, they will say, look, before COVID, this was the trend. Okay, so the passing is within. Now, combine these two, this it drops to 21 people out of the 90.
Right.
That drops to 23%. 23% out of the 90. Now, do I expect, because 180 people did the exam, there's 180 people, so the sample we have is 50%. Do I expect from the other 90 to have an equal number of people who passed both? No, I don't anticipate that. So I believe the passing rate is below 20% for this cycle. And that's why there should be pressure to actually, 2 things need to be addressed strongly is, you cannot, we have Dr. Luca, he's with us, and I will take his opinion on this. I don't want the NDEB to address, they call it NDECC exam. So the passing rate should not be addressed individually on each component. It should be addressed as combined compared to the ACS before, because that's what I think is fair.
Right.
Because if they're going to start to split it into combination, then it's another bottleneck. They're saying, oh, look, the passing for each component is good, but what's the overall? People who finish the process. I believe the overall is going to be less than 20%, and that is a ridiculous decrease. And in my opinion, that means one of 2 things, if we want to think about it. So all of these people who passed in the past, they did not meet the standard. They were not good. So you let all of these people in the past, based not on a recognized standard, or you're being ridiculous with the new people, which I think is the second approach, the second way it is.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to you, Dr. Luca, but I just want to mention to all of our viewers, we are going to be doing a Q&A towards the end of the session. So go ahead and use the question and answer box at the bottom of your panel here on Zoom. And the session is being recorded, so we will have a full recording available on our social media fairly shortly after the session. Dr. Luca, just coming back to you, what are your thoughts on those points that Dr. Marwan just made?
So I agree with Dr. Marwan's analysis of the situation. The overall passing rate of the NDECC is what needs to be considered. Otherwise, they've effectively introduced a new exam, which is unreasonable. And his estimate that the passing rate is below 20% combined is, I agree with it. And I also agree that it is ridiculous. So yes, it's true. This means all of you need to work harder, but it's also true that we need to fight back against this, because the NDEB has created huge logistical problems for themselves that now we are going to have to deal with. The NDEB barely has the capacity to clear the backlog that they currently have, plus deal with the whole new influx of candidates that are coming from the AFK and the ACJ. Now they have to deal with the 80% of people who have to repeat one component of the exam. Now, as it is now, when a registration window opens, it fills up within 5 to 10 minutes. Given this current passing rate, that's not going to change. And just getting a spot for the exam is going to be a problem for the continuity of the NDECC. Now, that's a problem for us. That's not for them. They get paid regardless. But we're going to be fighting to get a spot. We're going to have to stress over preparing, trying to be perfect for the exam. And then we're going to have the same concerns over whether or not we passed or failed because of the subjectivity of the criteria, because of the lack of training and of the evaluators and the issues with the accuracy and precision of their evaluations. This is going to be a huge problem for all of us if we don't try to change things. Yeah.
Needs to be focused on. What's the definition of unlimited right now? Attempts.
Unlimited attempts? Well,
that needs to be addressed with NDEB, because you're saying unlimited attempts in 5 years, but you can technically, based on the capacity, you can only take the exam 2 times a year, or maybe even 1 time a year with all of this backlog and pressure. So what's the advantage of the unlimited? That's something that needs to be brought up. Unlimited means the minute I receive a failure, I should be able to register for the second cycle. Then it makes sense unlimited. And unlimited means evaluation should be faster. It shouldn't be quarterly. So it's quarterly evaluation, plus after you get the results, you wait another 3 to 4 months to be able to get a seat.
Yes. Yes, I agree with that. The idea that there are unlimited attempts is technically true, but practically untrue. Because good luck getting a spot. It takes 2 to 3 months to get the results. And then if there's a failed component, yes, again, good luck getting a spot. So unlimited attempts is an issue, but another issue, just as big of an issue, I think, is how it's being evaluated. Because even if it is the unlimited attempts, if we're having to go to Ottawa 2, 3, 4 times to get through this exam, that's huge money, huge stress for all of us. So I think those are both important issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
There's actually multiple points that needs to be addressed. And I think I just added the unlimited attempts, but the other issues are, to summarize them, that needs to be addressed. And I think Dr. Luca is taking care of that. We're just discussing one, the failure, that you can fail one project. That needs to be addressed. 2, the time, because they squeezed it in, they put more projects in the same time frame as compared to the previous process. That's one. But there is also a third point, the transparency and release of results, because now they don't tell you why you failed. They just tell you you failed. Back before the previous process, they give you a detailed report of each project and what did you lack in that project. And the evolution of evaluation went from extreme detail to lack of detail. So for example, in 2012, they used to tell you you had excess in the mesiobuccal gingival corner of this preparation. Then they went to, you have excess, but we're not going to tell you where. Then now they went to, we're not going to tell you anything. It's a pass or fail. Right. And it went from, you can actually come check your work and object, to you cannot object.
Right. So there's no more appeals process.
No more appeals. You don't know why you failed. And this is very drastic change. And this change actually was announced before. Now it became reality because results were released. So pressure needs to be applied. Pressure needs to be applied. But the thing that I want to highlight as well, because what people are going to go through, and this is the other side of the story, is when they get the results, they're traumatized. They feel they have been treated unfairly. Okay. They want to vent, they want to talk, they want to complain, okay, about what's happening. They will talk to us. Prep doctors actually listens to them. Nobody else listens to them when they talk, but talking to prep doctors is not going to change the process. So what's going to end up happening is, after a couple of days, they pick themselves up again, they go back to the same process and they participate. Okay. And what I'm advising people to do, two things. One, if you have not joined this organization, don't complain. And I'm going to be very honest about this. What bothers me the most is people who come to complain. And when I ask them, are you part of this organization? No, I'm not part of this organization. Then I don't want to listen to you, because there is someone working hard and there is an organization trying to bring change. Then go join the organization, at least be a member, and let that body take care of this. You will save a lot of agony. And two, understand the reality. So when you're going again, you know what's ahead of you. You know that they're not going to tell you where you failed. You know that the process is extremely hard. So if you want to go that route, prepare well as much as you can in a realistic fashion for the unjust process that happened. If you want to participate in an unjust process, at least from your perspective, prepare well for the unjust process until hopefully through the pressure, some change happens. But don't go to the exam unprepared, and don't complain about things that on an individual level, that's not going to bring change. And that's the reality. So that's what I want. That's the advice I give people.
From a prep doctor's perspective, does this change anything about the way that we deliver our course?
Yes, I spoke to the in the last board meeting. I told them I want to put a huge incentive on 6 months training and make it as flexible as possible for people, because I want to push people to actually prepare well, because I don't believe that 2 to 3 months extra training is going to actually pull them back that much. Because now people who are in our labs right now, they only have 3 months training. 3 months training. Now, by the way, this is another fact. People who did the exam, Dr. Luca was one of them in the first batches. These people have been training not for 3 months. They have been training for, some of them, over a year. And this was the result. So you're looking at what happened to people who are the most prepared out of the candidates that are now out in the market. Okay, so when I speak to people who just started the courses and they talk about people that went to the exam, people who went to the exam did not practice for 3 months. The majority of them, because it's the first batch, they were with us since January, some of them even before January. So they were training for a long period of time. So for the future candidates, be careful. Be careful how you plan for your exams.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant, is when in the board meeting, back to the same point, I said, we're going to put a huge incentive on the 6 month training. So the product actually will be announced. There's a lot of products right now, so I don't want to say something wrong, but I mean, the idea is, yes, you can sign up for a 3 months, but you have the opportunity to extend with the same discount and with the same privilege as if you signed up for 6 from the beginning, as long as you exercise it within the 3 months. And we did the same for the situational. So if you actually look at it, it's almost a $4,000 discount on the package if you go for the 6 months. And that's what I want to see. I want to see people take it seriously and go back to the same approach that people followed before. Because because of the cycles, people used to prepare for half a year. Now, because of the flexibility, we see people signing up and they are in the first month in the course. They haven't finished the course and they already signed up for the exam.
On the situational judgment side of things, this result is almost a validation of the preparation that we put in for this course. How do you view the result on the situational side?
Okay, I'm very proud of the effort that was put, by the way, and the way we conducted the course, but I'm always a cautious person. Like I always go on the cautious side because it's not a joke to actually be responsible for people's future. For the situational, we went with the strictest rubrics. We were pushing people for the strictest rubrics. Nobody knows what's the rubrics of NDEB, so we don't know how they're actually evaluating. The other thing is, if you look at the way people passed both components, it's very important to analyze the way they pass. The situational judgment has some leeway because you need to pass 6 out of the 10 stations. And you also should not fail 2 of the same competency. That's how it's structured.
Right.
So that gives some leeway. I would love to see people passing with 10 stations. That's my goal. Like I want to push people so that they pass the 10 stations because that's what I want to achieve. And right now, when I look at people who passed, we have an amazing passing rate in situational. It's amazing. It's phenomenal. But when I look at it, I still feel that people who passed the situational, they were lacking in some stations. And I know that down the road, from my experience with NDEB since 2011, things get stricter. They don't get easier. Okay, so that means don't think that, okay, because the passing rate is high, then I need to under prepare and just go for the exam. The approach works, the material works, the practice needs to be increased. So that's what we're working on, is including a practical component.
Mm-hmm.
And we already have a batch actually that's doing the practice component of the course. We see a phenomenal change in the performance because it's just a matter of talking and practicing, and it will come. The information are there. Mm-hmm. So I'm not worried about the situational from the way the course is structured. Coming to the skills, the majority of people who did not clear the skills, they failed by 1 project.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you actually take these people and put them in the old criteria of how ACS used to be, all of them will pass because 1 failure was permitted. Yeah. Now it's not permitted. And now the challenge is no longer being able to pass each project individually. And this is something I want to highlight. And I want to talk about, I talk to people who succeeded this exam and what people need to do for the future. Back in the days, the focus was, I want to pass each project individually. I can find out which project I'm weak in. Okay, and then I'll figure out a formula so that I can maximize my strength, ignore my weaknesses, and I'll pass with a 1E, 2D, or I'll pass with a 4D. I'll figure out a way to pass. Now, you're not allowed to fail anything, which means most people, they're able to pass each project individually. Like if you tell them to do each task individually, they'll pass it. When you bring 7 in a time crunch together, and I ask you to pass all 7 at the same time, that's the challenge. The time, 7 at the same time. And this is why when people ask me, how do we know we are ready, or how should we actually schedule for our exams, the new candidates, I say, step number 1, you have to reach a point where you are passing each project independently. Okay. When you reach that level and our instructors give you the green light, they say, okay, now you're in a position, you passed all of these projects independently. Your consistency in passing each independently is increasing. Now you need to develop that package consistency. This is when you should be starting to plan your exam 2 to 3 months from that time, not immediately. Because then it becomes a matter of, now I know how to pass each independently, then I have to put myself into a time crunch, 5 projects, 5 hours, 5 projects, 5 hours. So you have to keep repeating that pattern, and you should reach a consistency where the majority, you're not going to reach 100%, but the majority of the time you're able to pass all together. Then you know you're ready for the exam, because now the exam is a matter of consistency. And this is a message to people who are in the lab. They end up socializing more than working. Okay, we have 5-hour sessions, for example. When I look in the lab, they're socializing. They go work and they socialize, they take a breaks. And I spoke to someone who actually cleared the ACS. He said, in the last 3 months, all I was doing I come into the lab, I put earplugs, I work 5 hours straight, and I leave. And I repeat that every day. 5 projects, 5 projects, 5 projects to develop that stamina and to develop the consistency. Everybody should be doing that. And I spoke to people in the labs yesterday. I said, this is what you should be doing. You want to socialize? Punish yourself for 5 hours, then reward yourself. Go downstairs and socialize and enjoy your time. But don't socialize in the middle. Don't enjoy your time in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's my advice to the skills.
So we're going to come to Q&A in just a moment, but I wanted to just come back to you, Dr. Luca, and find out, in your opinion, what is the advantage of doing this under the umbrella of an organization like ITD AOC?
Well, it gives our efforts a legitimacy, and it allows us to give a more directed, specific, and powerful message. And you don't have to take my word for it. It's worked. It has been working. And the more members we have, the more influence we'll have, the more we'll be able to alter this process for the better for us. And the way I like to think about all of this is in terms of what you can control and what you can't control. Everything that Dr. Marwan is saying is under your control, like the effort that you put into your process, preparing for it, etc. What is also under your control is your ability to influence the NDEB and the process and what we're asked to do. And you do that by joining the organization, because what they are asking us to do is unreasonable. It is genuinely unreasonable for many reasons that we could discuss for a long time if you wish. And we don't have to accept this. It's unfortunate that this is the system that they've put in place, but we can work to change that. We've already submitted a list of requests. Now it's our job to pressure them to implement those changes. So that is within your control. It's unfortunate that we're in that situation, but you have to do both. You have to prepare to the best of your abilities, and you have to work against or work for changing this unjust system that we're put under. So that's
You
what
said that you have made changes in the past. What are some of the victories that you guys have had so far?
Well, a big one in relation to the NDECC is the change from initially when it was announced that if you failed one, you had to repeat both components. We were able to get that change so that if you fail one, you only have to repeat that one component, which is huge. Because if it were under the original scenario, now 80% of people would have to complete the whole exam over again. I'd say that's the biggest, most recent one in relation to the NDECC. In relation to the AFK during COVID, we got them to add hundreds of additional spots in written format for the AFK. We had done that through pressure. So now our next step and our focus right now is to address these problems with the NDECC, and they mostly have to do with the evaluation of the NDECC. And to whoever is listening to this, whether you have taken the exam, are going to take the exam, or whether you're early on in the process, this is going to affect you, because you're going to have to face waiting to get a spot for the exam. You're going to have to face the stress of doing the exam and not knowing if you did well or not because of the subjectivity of the evaluation. You may face the issue of failing even though you think you provided excellent work. So regardless of who you are and where you are at this process, this is something that needs to be addressed because it's going to affect you at some point or another. So yeah.
I just want to mention one point, and this is what I was talking about. Be proactive, not reactive. So join the organization before you fail. You don't have to wait to get a traumatic experience and then you decide to join the organization. For those who did not take the exam, you don't have to wait and say, oh, if I pass, then I'm not going to join. And if something happens, then I'll join. Everybody should be working together. So be proactive. The more proactive you are, the less trauma you're going to face, the less agony, and the more success the organization will have.
Okay, let's jump into some of the Q&A now. And I realize there are a lot of questions. Many of those questions have already been answered. So I'll try to cut through to some of the questions that haven't. In starting out with Dr. Kunal, who asks about the differences between the process for internationally trained dentists and for Canadian graduates. And maybe I'll start with you, Dr. Luca. Have you guys done any research or looked deeply into that difference between how local grads versus internationally trained dentists are getting through to the market?
Well, there's a certification process that graduates from accredited programs. So that's not just Canadian graduates, that's also graduates from the US, New Zealand, Australia, and Ireland. Before they had two exams, the written and the OSCE, which next year is changing to one exam, is the virtual OSCE. What is significantly different between the two processes is that Canadian graduates are not assessed for all the competencies necessary to practice dentistry in Canada. One major example is the situational judgment component and the requirements in their professionalism, communication, patient-centered care, things like that. Just Canadian graduates are not assessed for those competencies under the certification process. Now you can ask why. The regulators make the excuse that they're evaluated for those competencies in school. I think that's unreasonable. The NDEB is supposed to be an additional check and balance on the competency of practicing or soon to be practicing dentists. So in my opinion, it's unreasonable that they are not assessed for those competencies. And the passing rates for those exams the historical passing rates for those exams have been very good. Before 2021, they were in the low to mid 90% range. 2021, they dropped to the mid to high 70s. And we know there was a lot of pushback from the association that represents Canadian dental students. They were very upset that that happened. I can go into speculation about why that happened, but regardless, the certification process is significantly easier. The equivalency process now effectively is 4 exams: the AFK, ACJ, and then the 2 components of the NDECC.
They used the one exam from the Canadian graduates and they increased one. So they put it onto the internationally trained dentists.
Yeah, essentially.
We actually have a question about that from Dr. Dylan, who asks, I've heard that OSCE is hard now. Is 3 months enough to prepare for the new virtual OSCE exam?
For any international trained dentist who was able to clear the process, the OSCE is not hard. It's much easier, by the way. They have the knowledge and all of that. So as Dr. Lucas said, even when you look at high 70s passing rate, that's a dream for internationally trained dentists to achieve. And that's why when you actually look at the passing rate of internationally trained dentists who go through the OSCE, it's above 95%.
Yeah. And our results here, prep doctors, are in the high 90s when it comes to OSCE.
Everybody passes that exam.
Yeah,
they have no issues.
Yeah. Okay. We have questions about what changes could be made to the exam itself and how it is kind of assessed. So whether dentists could have the results, a more detailed look. How confident are we that something like that could be changed? Or is that really just a pipe dream at this point?
I'm going to talk about my opinion. I think if you apply a lot of pressure, you can get things changed. Okay, but it has to be applied, as we said, through the organization. It should show strength. There should be a lot of pressure applied. How quick the changes can take place, you know how Canada it is. It's pretty slow. Things don't happen. Are you going to achieve all the changes at once? I don't think so. They're not going to actually bend to all the changes, but there will be sometimes like they change few, they leave few. So you have to push hard. And that's why when I talk to people, I say you deal with the exam as if the changes did not take place.
Right.
That's how you that's the reality. No changes took place now. You prepare as if no changes took place. And then you fight for changes. When they happen, it's an advantage. I'm not saying just leave it and just accept the process. You have to do both. But I wouldn't actually adopt into my practices the changes until they take place. And Dr. Luca talked about two achievements, major achievements the organization did. There are other achievements that may be considered minor, which is pushing NDEB to release the material list faster, pushing the NDEB to release the criteria faster, push back on the material list, changing some components of the material list. Now they even came up with a new change in the material list. They removed the interproximal carver. So it's like things like this they do in the process that actually affects people. I don't know if you're aware of this, Dr. Luca, about the interproximal carver.
I'm aware of that. Some individuals weren't happy with that. So
Major tool. And this is another problem with the process is that we talked about time. We talked about you can't fail a project, but they even limit you with the material you can use to conduct these projects. And then they come to a major tool that was used by people to complete the projects, and they remove it. And now you have to work with less tools to pass the exam. Yeah. So it's actually, it is ridiculous, because at least another variable we did not talk about, that in the past exam, people were allowed to bring the instruments with them that they were comfortable to practice with.
Right.
Now, no, you have to work with our instruments in a shorter period of time, and you're not allowed to fail a project. That's how the process transformed into.
Yeah. And from your perspective, Dr. Luca, because I'm seeing here in the Q&A, a lot of questions, a lot of suggestions about specific changes that they would like to see the NDEB make. How do you, as an organization, how do you guys kind of settle on what are going to be the priorities that you're going to be pushing for? Are you going to be holding a town hall or something like that? What are the next steps for you guys?
So we've already submitted a list of changes, requests to the NDEB. We're going to be posting those on our social media accounts tonight, so that it's publicly available, so that everyone is aware of that. And I encourage you to like and share those so that everyone has access to that and everyone sees what we're advocating for. In terms of what we decide to advocate for, it's a combination of what our members believe is a priority and what we think is reasonable to obtain. So an example with the NDECC asking for allowing one failed project within the skills component of the exam. We're not asking that because of the incompetence of internationally trained dentists. We're asking that because of the NDEB's inability to evaluate accurately and precisely, and because of their inability to give us the proper instruments and materials and provide us with insufficient amount of time to do that work to the quality that they expect. They need to give us a margin of error in the exam based on how they've set it up for us. So it is reasonable to request. It is simple for them to implement. That is why we are requesting it. So that's one example of what we're advocating for and kind of how we come to decide what we believe we should advocate for.
There are a lot of questions from people about, and I know you talked about this earlier, but how much time should somebody be putting in beyond the 3 months? What is the recommendation from us here?
It varies. It varies from one person to another. It's very tough, but to actually give a time period. But based on the previous process, people used to practice for half a year. That was like the 5-month product was the most popular. This is what people used to practice. So that's, in my opinion, that's considered a minimum that people should be aiming for. But I mean, people should have a strategy. It's not about time. It's not like, oh, I did 5 months and now I'm ready to go to the exam because I completed the time frame. Because there are super skilled people that are able to complete it in shorter period of time. And there are people who require more time. It varies. So the idea is, once they start to learn, first of all, don't book the exam until you know what level you're at. But once you start to learn the project and you start to do them, you should be monitoring out of 5 MODs, how many did I pass in the evaluation with the instructors. Once you build a level of consistency that in all the projects, I'm able to pass, let's say 70% of the time, I'm talking independently. Now it's the time to start to think, okay, I need maybe 2 to 3 more months to put the consistency and to do the mock exams and to practice, and I'll be ready. But when people are in a phase that they have not achieved the consistency at the individual project, even if they have, by the way, 1 week project, it's not like in the past. Because if there's one project you're struggling with, it will cost you the exam now. You can't go to the exam with 1 week project. So that's how you should gauge yourself. And you should be, that's the advice you should be asking the instructors here. The question that we used to get frequently before, do you think I am ready for the exam? Okay. Now people book the exam, then they ask us, do you think we are ready for the exam? And now you become in a dilemma, because this person is going to the exam. So do I want to affect him emotionally by saying you're not ready, and then they're gonna actually be not in the best energy, or should I boost their confidence, but I know they're not ready? So it becomes tough. So if you ask me this question before you register, I'll be able to give you a very objective answer. But when you come, you say, I registered for the exam, what do you think? You can't withdraw from the exam. You're going to the exam anyway. I know that I have to motivate you and give you the confidence, but on the skill level, I see there is a defect. So you put us in a very tough position.
Right. There are a number of questions, Dr. Luca, about politicians. And as somebody even asked, are you going to be meeting Justin Trudeau? I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But in all seriousness, what can be done in terms of engaging with political leaders in the country? What work have you guys been doing in that regard as well?
Yeah, I would love to meet with Justin Trudeau. That would be very helpful. Our political representatives can be very helpful. The issue is with the ones who want to be helpful, they don't know how to help. It's an issue with self-regulation in Canada, and organizations like the NDEB, they kind of exist in this vacuum with very little accountability. So even if you find people who want to help, they kind of don't know what to do. So what we have done, for example, is in Ontario, we worked with MPP Dolly Begum to introduce a bill called the Fairness for Ontario's Internationally Trained Workers Act, which would have created what are called advisory committees, which would bring together individuals from the Ministry of Health, individuals from the dental regulators, and us to the same table, so we can argue the merits of the credential recognition process that we have to go through. That way they can't run away from us, they can't ignore us. They would have to provide evidence for the system that they created and why it is valid and reliable, which they haven't done. We've asked them to do, they won't share that information, they're not transparent. This would have forced them to do it. Unfortunately, because of politics, that didn't pass. But those are the sorts of things we can do on the political level. I encourage all of you to reach out to your MPs, MPPs, other political representatives. Tell them your stories, tell them what you're going through, tell them the hardship that you're going through. Connect them with me and the organization. We can continue the conversation. We can tell them or inform them how they can help. Ultimately, it comes down to pressure, political pressure, media pressure, social media pressure. What the NDEB is doing to us is genuinely wrong, and we have the facts to back it up. The problem is they're in hiding. they're getting away with this because there's no spotlight on them. We need to put the spotlight on them, and we have the ability to do that, but we need your support. We need your help. We need your energy. We need you to join. We need you to contact media sources, political representatives. If all of you do that, we genuinely have a chance of making the system better for us. If we do nothing, then unfortunately, we're gonna have to put up with this. So.
Yeah. And how specifically can people reach out to ITDAOC? How can they join your organization?
Well, if you go to www.itdaoc.ca, that'll bring you to our website, and then there's a membership tab at the top. Just click on that, and then there'll be a join now button where you can register. It's free for 2 months, so literally no cost up front. If you're not happy with the service that we're providing and what we're advocating for, you could cancel at the end of the 2 months at no charge. It's $100. $100 is a lot less than the $9,000 exam fee. So if we could save you one attempt at this exam, your money is more than made up. I also encourage you to join our social media accounts. They're all ITDAOC, or Internationally Trained Dentists Association of Canada. Follow us, like our posts, share our posts. We need to get this message out to as many people as possible, because we're genuinely right about our arguments. We just need to get the right people to hear them. So those are the two things that I would recommend everyone to do.
I want Dr. Luca to comment on one thing, because a lot of the candidates, they're afraid to be involved in any action.
Yes. Yep.
Because they're like, if our names are known, then we're going to get blacklisted. And that's why. So I just want him to comment on that aspect, and from the perspective of joining the organization, and also speaking to the MPs, like if they go speak to politicians in terms of their name being known and being blacklisted and so forth. So if you can comment on that, Dr. Luca.
So a couple points there. One, there is no blacklist. That's a conspiracy theory that people like to put around. The NDEB can't do anything to us. And even if you're worried, everything in relation to the organization is anonymous. My face is out there, not yours. My name is out there, not yours. So they can't do anything to you. The other point is, there's nothing that they can do to you that's worse than what they're doing to you right now, how they're treating you right now. So I understand the concern why people are afraid, but there really is no reason to be concerned. In fact, they should be afraid of us. They should be afraid of us organizing that, coming after them for their mistreatment of us. We should be the one who are being proactive. Us being afraid benefits them. So please, I need everyone to have the courage to join the organization and fight back. Otherwise, this mistreatment is going to go on. Sorry, what was the other point? Contacting
MPs and their names being revealed to the MPs, and then because people are in general afraid. I know it's a conspiracy, but I just want him to comment on that, because every time we speak to people, they're afraid. And what happens is, the only time they became courageous is once they have exhausted their 3 attempts in AFK or ACJ, or their process is done, then they speak up. And that's, again, being reactive. Be proactive. Join before you actually run into problems, so that you can avoid the problems. Yeah. And don't be afraid. If you join before, you change the process, you make it better, then you don't have to deal with all of this after you're locked up.
Yeah, because there's actually a question here from somebody, or a comment, I should say, from somebody who says that everybody who emailed the NDEB before the exam failed. I don't know how you could possibly know that, but like, what is the truth in these kind of rumors and out there?
There is no truth to those rumors. There is absolutely no truth to those rumors. I understand why those rumors exist, because this process puts us under so much stress, so much mental anguish, that people start to develop these conspiracy theories, but there is no truth to those rumors. So I encourage everyone to have the courage to join, to contact your elected representatives, to contact local media organizations. in terms of contacting your local political representatives, why that's so important is because we have the ability to do that, but a lot of times they won't respond to us because we aren't members. We aren't in their jurisdiction, in their area, so they won't respond to us. We need you to start that conversation. We need you to contact them, tell them your story, tell them what you've gone through, tell them why it's an issue. And the important point is, yeah, this is a problem that affects us, but it's also a problem for all Canadians because there's a shortage of dentists. And with the Canadian, the new dental care plan, there's going to be a whole new influx of patients. Who's going to treat these people? Us. It's us. We're the people who need to come in to treat these patients. So the NDEB keeping us out of the market with these unfair registration practices is a detriment to all Canadians. And it's something that could be fixed relatively easy. They're just not willing to do it. This is what our politicians, our political representatives need to know. All we need you to do is to start that conversation. Email them, tell them your stories, tell them what you're going through, and then connect them with us. And we'll continue the conversation. That's what we need from you.
Thank you, Dr. Luca. So just to finalize, Dr. Marwan, there's a lot of questions about what is the future outlook for prep doctors? Are we opening skills centers in Vancouver or Montreal, or just in general, what is our outlook going forward into 2023?
2023, yes, we are opening the skills in Vancouver. So we will have, I believe we're aiming for February. Situation was brought there. We're working on bringing the mock exams to Vancouver as well. So that's the first center. This is what I know of. I think situational also, we're going to expand it to Montreal and Calgary. So that's in terms of courses. This is what we have in plan. Again, there's going to be a lot of flexible products released for people to be able to cope with this process because of the flexibility in bookings that they have.
Yeah.
And if people want more information, the management will be the best people to answer their questions. We do have an incentive for the 6-month training for new candidates that are entering the process, especially those who are coming out of ACJ. I believe they need at least 6 months in order to be able to at least get to a position to maximize their success with something that is even more difficult. And I just have a final advice I want to give for everybody. You have to do 2 things in order to succeed in this process. Prepare well for the exams and channel your energy through the organization. If you have any problem, channel it through the organization. Take guidance from the organization. Do the right thing. I'm not saying don't do anything, but don't waste your energy in venting only. I know people want to vent. I know people are stressed out. They like to talk. But the problem with this talk is that a lot of energy is wasted. A lot of rumors emerge. And this actually what happens every year in the past. This is what happened before. People talk, they vent, they talk about how unfair the process is. Their energy goes in the air, then they pick up themselves, they come back, they practice, they go to the exam again. And once they pass the process, they forget about everything that happened in the process because they're too traumatized and they start a new life. But that should not continue like that with an organization that's available. So if you have anything to do, step number 1, join the organization if you haven't. Step number 2, take simple steps that were advised by Dr. Luca. Take those steps and that's it. Leave it up to the organization so that also your energy is saved to focus on your practice. And then practice hard under the reality that exists. Once the reality changes, it will change for the better. So that's the mentality people should be in.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's all we have time for today. I want to thank Dr. Luca and Dr. Marwan for the session. If you are looking to join the organization, it's itdaoc.ca. You can register there. And that is all for today. Take care. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Dr. Luca.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.